Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the Max Revenue YouTube channel. This is our special series that we're calling Diary of a New Producer. My name is Micah. I will be your host. What the Diary of a New Producer is all about, if you haven't checked us out before, is we follow a producer, Ian Cognito. That's not his real name, but we take him from week one and give you a look behind the curtains at what he's going through, how he's building his book, from hopefully scratch to $1 million plus, or however big he wants to make this book go. I'm his mentor, so let's get into this, folks. This is week, I want to say 14. I could be wrong, but week 14. If you've missed our previous episodes, go check them out. Every week's different. We talk about different topics. You can hop in at week 10 if you want, but every single week we'll have something relevant on various topics. This week, what we're going to be getting into for you, me and Ian talked about cold calling, so I'm going to get into some of the things we discussed there on openers and scripts. We're going to talk about first impressions, why they matter. We're going to talk about playing the long game, and then we're going to talk about last year's results for myself and why that came up. All right, so here we go. Cold calling, right? This is the topic I think most of us are curious about. We want to get better at, we want to learn about. There's a really good book I just read, and I told Ian this to check it out himself. It's called Sales Superpowers. It's by Justin Michael. I'm a big fan of his. He's a really successful tech sales guy, consultant, coach. So if you're looking for something like that, check him out. I know a few of you have reached out to him, but I adopted his script and made it a little bit insurance specific, but I took a lot from it. Mainly the opener of who's in charge of, and then the follow-up question is, how are you handling due diligence? That's what I say. But I took that from Justin Michael, and he talks about the psychology behind it. But this book is really good. It goes through sequencing, it goes through emailing, it goes through phone scripting, all that stuff, right? And now I've taken a lot of that stuff, I adapted it, changed it for insurance. So it's kind of like, the best of both worlds if you're watching us. But go check out that book. All right, but some specific cold call things that we had talked about is the very first line when you open, right? So you say, hey, is this John? Yes. Hey, this is Micah at XYZ Agency. Now this is where Ian and I differentiate ourselves a little bit from each other. He asks, how have you been? And it's worked really, really well for him. The psychology behind that, I've used to say that as well, is the person thinks they kind of know you or it sounds familiar. And anyways, it works for him. And I am not someone out here who's going to say asking how you're doing or how you've been is a bad thing. If that's what works for you, by all means, go do it, right? There is no magic bullet. The reason I stopped saying it was largely due to the fact I thought it was unnecessary. It was a filler, and I just don't think it mattered. It was very natural for me to say that, very comfortable. I'm from Wisconsin, from the Midwest. That was something we always said, and I get pushback. Like, I always have to ask, how have you been? How are you doing? That's impolite if I don't. Well, I'm now in Texas, Southern hospitality state. I don't say it barely at all, right? How have you been? Unless they say it to me first, then of course I'll get into it. So, you can say, how have you been? Say it if you want to say it. I don't say it. What I say is, after I say my name, I pause, and then I just say, yeah, Susie, I can see the wheels spinning in your head a bit there. If you're trying to figure out who I am, we've never spoke before. That's it. Pause again, they'll laugh, they'll chuckle, whatever. And then right from there, I get into, hey, Susie, are you in charge of the insurance at your company, or does that roll up under someone else on your team? That's it again. Stop, let them answer. And then the next question is, hey, how are you guys handling due diligence of that? Stop again, boom, done, right? That's the script that I use. There's not a silver bullet though. I've talked about this before, the power in the pause in that very first part that really helps me get a feel for what the buyer's like. Hard to describe it, but you can really pick up a lot from that silence. Another aspect of cold calling we talked about is, what if you can't find a name? Should you just say a name you think it is, or should you just go in to the secretary or the gatekeeper who picks up and say, hey, who's in charge of, or who handles that? Again, this is an area where Ian and I differentiate or are different, right? He prefers to just, if he doesn't have a name, ask who it is. I actually found, I've said that too, but what I found works better is if I say a name. Even if it's wrong, and you will stumble on this one, you will call people who are dead. I hate to admit it, it happens to me probably once a month. It's embarrassing, and you just say, man, I am so sorry, my data is really bad. Let's start this over. Who's in charge of this? But the reason I like to start off with a name is I feel like I have just a higher success rate of getting through, right? Of getting through that first initial call instead of getting screamed and say, nope, not available, let me take a message. Now, let's say I ask if is Susie Smith in, and they say, nope, she's not today. And they said, you want to leave a message? Here's what I'll say is, yeah, I'd be glad to leave a message for Susie, but first, just to make sure I'm calling the right person, is Susie the one who's actually in charge of the insurance? I found people are a lot more willing to share that information than who the decision maker is now that the conversation started a little bit. Rather than just leading off the call with who is it, they're so trained to shut you down. So that's the reason I like to start with some name if I have one. Now, if you also know me, I'm not a huge fan of doing hours of research before a cold call because the odds are you're not going to talk with people, right? Most of the time, so don't waste all your time researching. But if you can find a name, call it. That's what I would say. All right, the next thing I want to talk to you all about today is playing the long game, okay? Here's the deal. Your first year as an insurance producer is going to be very difficult because you're going to have conversations, you're going to get some information, but they're just going to be busy. It's not a priority for these people. These are the leads that turn into really, really hot leads for you next year. So the key is you need to stay in touch with these people, right? You need to, not every week, but every other month, send them something, right? Just an email with a value piece. If you're in that area, drop by something, say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, whatever. This is what you got to be doing between the time you met this year and next year when you're going to start that process again. Back to organization a little bit. I have a list. I've talked about the follow-up later list, but I also have a hot list for next year. So as I'm working here, let's just say in 2023, all the deals that fall through the cracks where I think like, man, that's one I should get next year. I put them on a separate list and it's just called hot leads for next year, right? And within that list, now when that next year's starting or I'm planning for next year, I feel like I got a jump start, right? I got maybe 15, 25 prospects that I'm like, these are the hot ones. Of course, they're not gonna all come to fruition that year, right? That's just what's gonna happen. That's okay though. The point is I have a place to kind of start honing in on for the next year. And again, you gotta keep in touch with these people, which is why I like creating a list and it stays in front of your face all the time. All right, let's talk about two more things. I said first impressions and why they matter. This is more so on submissions to underwriters. So Ian and I were talking about putting together a submission for some new prospects, new accounts that maybe BOR'd, and I just told him how important it is to stress to your client that first submission. That first impression makes a really big difference. So you want to you got to be able to demonstrate this to your clients and your prospects, and when you're talking with them, stress how important it is and share the reasons why, right? The psychology behind it. It's like buying a house. I love this analogy. A staged home is going to sell way better. A home presented by a real estate agent who knows a ton is going to do way, way better, right? So the key is that you need to be able to demonstrate this to clients so they understand and they invest the time with you, right, throughout your due diligence process or when you win the business to help build out a good submission. These are the kind of things that differentiate you. So just share that with your clients and prospects. They like to hear kind of how underwriters think. And if you share that with them, it's kind of like, hey, you're providing them insider information, talking about things that most agents don't talk about. Okay, and then the last thing I want to talk with you guys about is my results from last year. And I'm only saying this because I'm not going to get into all the details, but Ian asked me, good question, right? He said, hey, you're my mentor. How'd last year go for you? Our year goes 11-1 to 11-1. And he said, what would you take away? What could you maybe tell me that I could, learn from? And so I just went through my results with him. That was it. And my biggest lesson from last year, if I had to say I had a lesson that I learned, is that stay consistent. You're going to go through stretches where you sell nothing. I went on a 5-month period where I sold nothing. I still ended up having a pretty solid year. I think I did about, in booked revenue, I think it'll be like 250 to 300 range, somewhere in there, at least 250. So of revenue. So that's a solid year, right? And I'm starting over myself. That was my second year. And I just told him, I said, just stay consistent, and you're going to have valleys and gaps, but keep plugging away and you're going to fall into new accounts, new opportunities. It's hard to explain, but if you stay with the numbers game on the prospecting, there's people out there that need help. There's a lot of poor producers. The bar is low. You will stumble into opportunities. I promise you. I made a comment like this on our podcast. I think you could trip over not trip over, but I think you could stumble your way into 50,000 of revenue a year if you just cold called, right? And hit your numbers there. So that's all I got for you this week. If you enjoyed this episode, do me and us a huge favor, subscribe to it, give us a like, comment below, share with your friends and family, check us out on LinkedIn, our newsletter, check out our course if you want that. We got resources for you if you're a producer. We want to help. Good luck out there.